Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the February meeting of Leeds Council Executive Board. At the start of the meeting, I'd just like to draw everybody's attention to the fact that Andrew Carter has submitted his apologies for today's meeting, and Councillor Barry Anderson is in attendance in a non-voting capacity, and we welcome Barry to this afternoon's meeting. I will turn to the items at the top of the agenda. Are there any appeals against refusal of inspections of documents, please?
Thank you, Chair. To confirm, no appeals have been received for today's meeting.
Thank you. Item 2, exempt information, please.
Thanks, Chair. Should the board be agreeable, the following appendices, which are designated as being exempt from publication, will be considered in private at the conclusion of the public part of the meeting. That's Appendix B to Item 9, Capital Receipt Programme Update, Appendix 3 to Item 10, Development of the Kirkland's Autism Project, and Appendix 1 to Item 15, District Heating Update.
Thank you. Are there any, Item 3, are there any late items, please?
Thanks, Chair. To confirm, there are no formal late items of business. However, by way of supplement, the board has been provided with the following for its consideration: a corrected recommendation for the 22-23 Revenue Budget and Council Tax Report, which is Item 7A, and also for Item 16, Leeds Safer Roads Vision Zero 2040 draft for consultation. Members have received for their consideration the related Scrutiny Board inquiry report from the Scrutiny Board in Infrastructure, Investment and Inclusive Growth, and also an updated Appendix 1 to the report, which now includes graphic design work.
Thank you. I'll turn to Item 4. Are there any declarations of interest, please? I don't see any indications. Item 5 is the minutes of the meeting we held in December 2021. I take it everybody is happy with those minutes. That's great. And we'll move on to the first portfolio, which for today's meeting is my portfolio. And Item 6 is the Best City Ambition proposal, which we are recommending to take to full council alongside the budget at the end of the month. The Best City Ambition approach has been taken to hear general purposes council before, and it is recognising as we come out of the pandemic that we have achieved a lot by working together as a city and working with different organisations as a city towards common aims through the periods of lockdown and through the pandemic. And instead of having a best council plan that was wholly focused on what the council itself as an organisation would achieve, that we'd look at working across sector and across the city on some big themes for what we want to do. I think we recognised in previous meetings around this that in doing that we have the power of bringing everybody together in the city, which has been incredible, and we hope to continue with that. But also, in terms of accountability, it's inevitably going to be a little bit looser as organisations who we don't fund or we don't have under contract, we will have a different relationship with. As the report sets out, we will bring together some organisational objectives later in the year allied with this, and this is to be recommended to full council to be adopted. With that, I'll introduce the report and see if anybody's got any questions or comments, please. Councillor Anderson, please.
There'll probably be debate at full council on this, but just 2 points I'd make, probably more with my scrutiny hat on than anything else. One was plain English. It's not written in plain English. I mean, what's the I know what an accelerator is in terms of road safety, but what is an accelerator? And as a result of that, I'm not convinced that some members of the public, when we were consulting with them, totally understood what was in there. Not that the messages are wrong. I'm not saying the messages are wrong. I'm just saying, would the average person on the street be able to understand the messages? And the other point that I was going to make was, performance indicators. Again, it was another thing. There's no measures to show what the baseline position is. You could already be just about perfect in a number of these for all we know, but we don't actually have measurements for them. So you might only have a small step to make in some areas, but giant steps in others, and we don't really know that. And as I say, you could already be there, but nobody knows.
Well, we have tried to take into account some of the feedback around the plain English, and I think we've actually moved away from accelerators. You'll be glad to hear. So we have tried to take that on board. No doubt, as we go into more of a kind of public-facing, shorter document, we'll particularly have to kind of focus on that. In terms of the indicators, this is a sort of attempt to try to move to kind of like a suite of indicators which will track progress over time, and using sort of an index which is kind of almost kind of being researched on an international basis. So I think what you'll see is a regular reporting on how we've got on. And part of the reason is behind which ones have been chosen is the regularity by which they can be reported. So hopefully they will be meaningful in that regard, and you won't have to wait ages to sort of see whether we're tracking progress. And we should be able to also deliver it at a more of a neighborhood level, which enables you to kind of get down into some of the details of the variation across the city as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Tom, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, it was just on that issue actually to add the government's white paper on levelling up mentions a new agency that's going to be set up that's going to try and look at this sort of thing, tracking data much more closely. We all remember, I think, the Audit Commission days and CPAs and all of that. So I think we'll need to just keep in touch with that work and make sure that we're being consistent wherever we can be. But the Social Progress Index is a good, as Neil says, international benchmark. We'll just have to make sure that we're linked up nationally. That won't happen immediately, I'm sure, but we'll do our best to keep up with it.
And Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. Well, we've discussed this at previous executive boards, haven't we? And I'm quite relaxed for this to go forward, because I appreciate the realism which is being put into the paper. So there's the area about how will success be measured, and we just talked about how we will measure progress in terms of data being collected and being disseminated down to community level. But what's most important about this document is its inclusivity. But we also need to use it as a benchmark for how we make decisions, because there are a lot of decisions which are taken by individual departments for areas that they have responsibility for, but have an impact elsewhere. And we've seen this sometimes coming into tension when we talk about our friendly policies that were mentioned earlier, where actually sometimes a decision made with good intentions to deliver a child-friendly city might actually inhibit the delivery of an age-friendly city, if we're looking at things like how we invest in our council properties, for instance. And this should be an exemplary document once it's fully developed, to enable us to do that kind of scrutiny at a decision-making level in communities themselves, hopefully. So I look forward to that inclusion that you've mentioned around local decision-making. But as it is, it's a very, very comprehensive and very ambitious document. And of course, as ever, it's how much we're interested in not just using it as a tick box exercise, because if you try and be everything to everybody, then whatever you do, it's going to tick 2 or 3 boxes out of the 10 that you've said are priorities. But we need to make sure that we're ticking the majority of them, I would think.
Thank you for those comments. I think the one thing I would say in conclusion on this item is it is a radically new approach for us as a council, and I think it is. I will say this in moving the report. It is, we will need to on the issues that have been raised around implementation, around data. We will need to continue to recognise the need to make it meaningful, and if necessary, to adjust our approach to make it happen. So with that, I don't see any other comments on this document. So I take it everybody is happy with it. And we will move on to item 7, A, B and C, which is the budget for financial year 22-23, which we have been asked to recommend to full council at the end of the month. Normally, we don't say much more than that at this meeting. and sale of discussion for full council. So if everybody's happy with that, we shall recommend the budget goes to full council at the end of the month. And Councillor Galton is reserving his position, and we will listen with great interest to everything you have to say at the end of the month, Councillor Galton. And with that, I'll move on to item 8 under Councillor Cooper's portfolio, please.
Thank you, Leader. And my first item today is the financial health monitoring for this year, month 9. You'll see from the report that the forecast overspend for the year is coming down still, and it now stands at just under £500,000. The budget also does still assume that we are going to achieve the £56.1 million of savings that we set out to do that. And just a note for executive board members that business rates collection is somewhat under from previous years as well this year due to the impact of COVID. I'll leave it there for now, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. I was wondering if we could have a little bit more detail around some of the pressures that are on children's services. We've commented before about how children looked after costs increased, but in this year's budget was an expectation that our very close working relationship with the NHS would have delivered a wider contribution from our partners in the city towards children's services costs, and that has not happened. And I just wondered if there was any particular difficulty that we should be aware of, because as I understand it, all that we were asking for was the same proportion of financial support as is expected in other local authorities. And I didn't think we were an outlier in terms of what we were doing differently that would merit not having that support from the NHS.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. Would you like to come in, please, Sal?
Yeah, thanks to Councillor Galton. And we are continuing that dialogue with our NHS partners in relation to the contribution that is made towards the placements budget this year. There's been very detailed work that's been undertaken, both in terms of looking at specific cases so that we can scale that up to ensure that there is a fair contribution made, but also we have been talking to other local authorities in order to get an accurate picture about how we benchmark in terms of the contributions that health make towards that placements budget. It's not entirely straightforward in terms of a direct comparison, because there are other factors that play in terms of how some of those calculations are made, but we would expect to see a greater contribution, and that detailed work is coming to fruition this week, and that will lead to further detailed dialogue with health in relation to their contribution.
Thank you, Sal. Would you like to come in, please, Tom?
Yeah, just to make the more general point as well. Obviously, I think integration white papers come out today, and the relationship that we have with health partners across the city is even more important these days. We have had some positive moves from them around the adults agenda recently, and that's very welcome in terms of the overall budget position. There's a bit more work to do, I think, for us, as Sal says, to fully agree and come to a sort of common understanding of where we are on the children's side. But I think this will be an ongoing, really important issue for us to get right as we move forward, particularly with the new arrangements coming through the integrated care partnership as well.
Thank you, Tom. I don't see anybody else wants to come in on item 8, so I'll turn to the recommendations on page 459 and over the page. And I see everybody's happy with those. If we can move on to item 9, please.
Thanks again, Leader. Item 9 is the annual update of the capital receipt programme and was last brought to Executive Board last February. The capital receipt programme has forecasts disposals totaling 133 million over the coming years. We've had 44.5 million of capital receipts realised so far in 21-22, with a further 2.9 million forecast to complete before the end of the financial year. Obviously, the council's capital receipt programme helps us with our wider spending and investment priorities, and helps us to maintain our capital programme going forward as well. I'll leave it there for now, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any comments on this paper? Councillor Galton, please.
Just a very quick one. It's to refer back to the discussion that we had about the best city plan and certain departments putting forward proposals that have impacts in other areas. It's good to see in this paper that some properties can get taken out of the asset disposal list if a good use can be found for them. And I'm encouraged as a ward councillor that asset management officers are looking at a whole ward perspective of how we manage our assets and look at potential disposals going forward. And I hope that delivers a good way of working that can be spread throughout the rest of the city, hopefully in the future.
Thank you. I take it there are no more comments, and turning to the recommendations on page 501 over to page 502. I see everybody is happy with those recommendations. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. We'll move on to Councillor Venner's paper, please.
Thank you. This is a very positive paper, which is about a proposal to develop specialist accommodation for adults who have learning disabilities and autism and behaviour that challenges services. It's a group of people who are amongst some of our most vulnerable citizens and who have been very difficult to place in suitable accommodation, and some of whom are outside Leeds in placements. So it will bring people back potentially into the city. We're hoping to build the accommodation in 2023. And although it's for adults, it will also be able to be used by children's services for 16 and 17-year-olds. So Executive Board are mainly asked to approve the change of site to a base in Yeadon. It's in Guysley Rawdon ward, and the ward members are supportive. So I'll leave it there, Chair, for comments, for my introductory comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Venner. Councillor Anderson, please.
To confirm the last comment that Councillor Jeremy, that the three Guysley councillors are in total support with this, and they hope to be kept involved in any discussions that go on as we go along.
Great, thank you. Everybody is happy with the recommendations on page 523. Thank you. We'll move on to item 11, Councillor Rafiq, please.
Thank you, Chair. Start again with the mic on. The report sets out what the council is currently doing in terms of offering services to residents to dispose of their waste correctly and safely. It compares to the national picture in terms of fly tipping and how the pandemic has impacted on services in the last couple of years. The council's waste strategy sets out a number of aims and objectives falling under the main categories of all doing our part, reducing access and maximising resources. The pandemic has slowed progress on changes that will help make a difference, such as the government's implementation of its national resource and waste strategy, which has promised new funds for councils to introduce food and glass collection, together with a national deposit return scheme for plastic and glass containers. This report, Chair, focuses on what more can be done to further support residents in being able to dispose of their household waste and unwanted items legally and responsibly, as well as outlining plans to target those who operate illegal waste collection services, often resulting in fly tipping. All this is complemented by a number of proposals and actions, which includes the removal of bulky item collection charges and expansion of capacity to increase the number of collections citywide by 20%. Establishment and expansion of a specially serious environmental crime team for the city that will focus on serious and organised environmental crime and expand the use of cameras at hotspot locations. Additionally, increasing the opening days or hours for commercial waste disposal of household waste at Kirkstall and Seacroft household recycling centres to help those disposing of waste at weekends. And also proposes an increased amount of free disposal allowed for landlords who are accredited to the landlord's rental scheme, Leeds rental scheme. It also proposes to introduce a scheme making it easier for Leeds residents to find a local waste carrier or clearance company with the required licenses and disposing of waste legally. We're also looking at working with some key organisations in Leeds, such as Zero Waste Leeds and Litter Free Leeds social movement. So we'll be providing financial and other support of those organisations as we go forward. And finally, we are proposing to suspend the decision to reduce the opening days for the Otley Ellergill, the housing recycling centre, with an ambition to develop a modern, more fit-for-purpose facility with the BU shop to replace the Otley Eden centres as we move forward. I'll stop there and happy to take any comments or questions. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rafiq. Councillor Anderson, please.
Well, I'll start off with the comment that you're probably expecting anyway, but it's nice to know that you've now joined the opposition parties in agreeing that it was wrong in the first place. But that aside, let's be positive about here, that there's a lot in this report that's to be welcomed. And that's the important thing, is that you are reflecting and moving along, particularly things one we need some clarity on. Are you going to limit on an annual basis the number of times a resident can use the bulky waste collection services? Because there used to be a number of years ago that you were limited as to the number you could make. Is that still going to be in place? So if you could just clarify that particular point. Also in respect to the landlords, I think that's a very welcome move that you've made, and linking it to the Leeds rental standard as well, because if we're going to try and get more landlords to join in on the housing side of things by bringing their houses up, if we can get them onto the Leeds rental standard, I think you will be contributing not just to your own goals, but I would have thought to the citywide goals as well. And that is to be welcomed in terms of that. I'm not quite sure whether or not you'll have the capacity, because my understanding is that once all the appointments are taken, that's going to be it in any one given cycle. So what you're going to do if you regularly exceed demand, regularly exceed supply, what backup measures have you got in place in order to try and meet that flexibility? And the fly tipping that's still going to be taking place on private land, how can we all collectively work better together to try and stop that occurring? Because you've brought in your environmental task force, for example, dropping of tyres, which often happens on private land, and it's up to the private owner of the land to do it. You know, is there anything more you could do to help and support some of these people? Because some of these landowners, as we know with landlords, are landlords by accident. Some of these are landowners by accident. They've not necessarily got a lot of money behind them. And the final thing is, can I also welcome the Ellergill proposal as well, because residents in parts of my ward were very worried. And it will have an effect on the carbon footprint in that area, because people won't have to travel as far to some of the other centres. So you're actually contributing to another one of the council's goals as well. So overall, yes, apart from the Barb comment I made at the beginning, I think this is something to be welcomed, and I think the people of Leeds will welcome it as well.
James Rogers would like to come in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try to remember all of those questions that were in there. In terms of the detail of the bulky waste collection scheme, we will do some further work to see what measures we need in place to put limits. I don't want to necessarily put limits on, but I also don't want it to be abused either. And therefore, I think we need to have a balanced approach to that. So we'll do some more work on that. In terms of dealing with the number of collections, as you'll see from the report, we're increasing capacity by 20%. In order to deal with the expected increase that we expect to see. We won't be back to where we were before, but that's because we encourage reuse quite significantly. So we want residents to continue to reuse rather than always use us to take away their bulky waste collections. But I would emphasise is that even when we take it away, we then look at reuse. So we're not just disposing of it just because we've collected with it. We will monitor closely the demand. And if we've got a pressure and issue with the demand, we will review that particular position and see what more we need to do. And then in terms of the private land issue, again, happy to look at and work on potential solutions, but we don't want to take away the responsibility that a private landowner has for dealing with their own land, but happy to work with members on looking at potential solutions.
Thank you, and I'd echo the comments about private landowners needing to take responsibility for their their own problems. I think that's important to underline on that. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. As with Councillor Anderson, it's a very welcome paper, but it tries very hard to make it sound like it's something new and exciting, whereas actually it's merely putting back in what was taken out. So this, what's it called, serious environmental crime team looks very much like the 4-person environmental enforcement team, which got reduced to 2 people, and now it's got the other 2 people back to make it a 4-person team, and it's been rebranded. But if it's able to deliver twice as much work in terms of getting perpetrators to book, then great, we're all for it. And in terms of the bulky waste collection, that's also very welcome. But of course, it was something that we did have as a council a few years ago, and we're merely reintroducing it. But it will be effective in terms of countering fly tipping, which is a blight and, of course, a pressure on the council's budget at the same time. But one of the things you will notice as local councillor when you do see fly tipping in your ward is that for every old sofa or fridge that you see dumped in a lay-by, you'll see just as much building waste and garden renovation waste. And if we don't reintroduce free inert waste at our dumps, then we're still going to continue to see that happening. And with a cost of living crisis, meaning that, and a shortage of contractors because they're all being employed in big construction efforts like we have here in the city centre, more people will be doing more DIY, and we don't want to be taxing them at the waste processing centres when they're already facing rising costs elsewhere. So a gesture in that direction would not only be welcome for those hard-pressed council taxpayers, but also, of course, it would have even more impact on fly tipping. Thanks.
If I could come back, well, first of all, on the inert waste, I'm not sure if you know, but the actual first bag is actually free of charge. We don't charge for the first, but if people are abusing it, so often if you're doing a piece of work, a DIY work, a piece of work at home, and you're a resident householder, you don't have to have much more than that to dispose of. But obviously, if you're doing a major refurbishment, then you need a skip or something, or that inert waste to be disposed of by a licensed carrier. We can't accommodate all commercial related waste, and it does get abused as well. You get a lot of people who work in the construction sector and then actually make use of it. So there's got to be, I think, is a balance in that, Councillor Galton. And we've actually initially started with obviously charging for everything, but we've listened and we said, well, the first, the bag, is free of charge. Anything subsequent gets charged. As far as your other points, I don't think. I mean, what we're proposing here is it's a number of different actions at the same time. And you mentioned about the 4 teams within the serious environmental crime team. Well, I'm pleased to tell you that as we speak, for the first time, if I'm correct on this, that we've actually managed to secure a 15-month custodial sentence for fly tipping in the city. And that sort of actions we need. We need experienced people who can actually, and the courts will send that message out and say that fly tipping is criminal offence, and people got to take notice and deter from doing that. I don't think we'll be able to catch everybody out there. There's no way. We haven't got the resource to do it until our public become our eyes and ears and start reporting people, but also actually taking note that it is a criminal offence and they stop doing it. So I think that's the message we're trying to get out. It's not just about what we can do, but what we can actually, the message together, all of us as a city, as elected members, as communities, how we actually kind of make this as a kind of a joint message out. So the comms is very important, and joint working, including elected members.
Thank you. James, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add to what Councillor Feeks just said. So when you actually look at the evidence that we have in terms of fly tipping, we don't see a large evidence of household inert waste being a part of those fly tips. We do see commercial trade type inert waste, and that's why I think key to this report is a number of the initiatives that we've got in there, particularly in terms of giving households an opportunity to find appropriate waste disposal firms and contractors to work with. And then secondly, in terms of the establishment of the new enforcement team that we're looking at, I don't recognise the articulation of a team of 4 down to a team of 2 to a team of 4, because actually what we've had previously is a team of 32 people working in clean and neighbourhoods teams across the city doing enforcement work amongst other jobs. What we're now doing is utilising some of that resource to create a citywide team which will do the more serious environmental crime, working actually across the city and across the region, where we know some of these unscrupulous providers are actually dumping across the whole of the region and not just in Leeds. And it's just probably worth of note, actually, we were in court yesterday with a particular case, and the perpetrator of that case has been sentenced to 15 months custodial sentence as a consequence of that work that we've taken forward. So there'll be more action of that nature that we will progress.
Thank you, James. And don't see anybody else wants to speak. So given the overwhelming support from the opposition members to what we're proposing here, I'll turn to the recommendations on page 541. And I see everybody's absolutely delighted to support our proposal moving forward. That's great. Shall we move on to Councillor Pride's papers and item 12, please?
Thank you, Chair. So first paper is the determination of school admissions arrangements for 2023 to 2024. It's important to note that this doesn't apply to academy, voluntary aided, foundation trust or free schools. This is just for local authority schools. It's not a huge change from last year, so I shall leave it at that.
I don't see anybody wanted to come in on this, so I'll turn to the recommendations on page 549, and I see everybody is happy with those. So could we move on to item 13, please?
Thank you. So this is the outcome of a statutory notice on a proposal to lower the age range of Wetherby High School. This is a formal step towards rebuilding Wetherby High School. The age range reduced, they haven't been taking sixth form students since 2019. So this is a formalisation of what's already happening. As it's a trust school, this proposal has come from the governing body, and we're just being asked to approve.
Councillor Anderson, please.
Briefly, to acknowledge the fact that the Wetherby councillors all support this and have been fully consulted at all times.
I don't see any other comments on this, so I'll turn to the recommendations on page 713, and I see everybody is happy with those. So we'll move on to your papers, please, Councillor Hayden, and item 14.
Thank you very much, Chair. My first paper is a climate emergency annual report, and I think everyone will see by the size and comprehensive nature of this report that there's an awful lot of work going on across the city to tackle the climate emergency from what we can do in Leeds. So huge thanks to Polly Cook and her team for the huge amount of work that goes on all the time. And I've been really, really impressed since I took over this role nearly a year ago. And to Councillor Neil Walshaw as chair of the SEAC committee, and to all members of council and partners who sit on that committee, and for their commitment and enthusiasm and work on tackling this, what is called, and it is an emergency. So this report details what's happened in the last year, but also seeks adoption of an energy strategy and action plan and consideration of a range of other actions which support the council strategy to achieve net zero carbon by 2030. So I'll leave it there for any questions.
Thanks, Councillor Hayden. A good summary of a very long report. Councillor Anderson, please.
Again, there's a lot of great work being done in here, but are the public aware of what you've done? I personally think not, because I think that what you've proved is what the council have been able to do in terms of the savings that you've made in terms of carbon. But are we getting that message out to the public, and are we getting out to other businesses that could be doing a lot more? You've certainly led well on that. So that's the positive side of things. On the negative side of things, we are in our group getting a bit worried as to the general direction you're taking this. We are not taking our residents along with us. You are leaving them behind with some of the things that you're bringing forward. We also need to think about how we're going to place on things. I mean, because I've been out in the doorstep, and one or two people have been complaining to me about the subsidies they're having to pay and their energy costs nowadays. Without, because they are just, that's what the media are telling them. So they are grasping a hold of that, and they are seeing climate change as costing them money. So we've got an issue that we need to do. We're all going on about how it's costing a lot. So we need to make sure we're taking the public with us. And I don't think we are taking the public with us in terms of what we're trying to do. And we're also asking some people to go a bit quicker than they actually want to do. And so we need to improve our communication, and we need to start having a relook again as to whether or not we're on target to do, because we've got targets for 2025, we've got targets for 2030, we've got targets for 2038, we've got targets for 2040, we've got targets for 2050, and people are getting all very confused as to which ones apply, where, when, how, and because of we're not communicating well with residents. But you've got some good things in here, and I think we should be telling the people of Leeds the good things that you've done. But I don't honestly think you are succeeding. Certainly in the outer areas, you are not succeeding in getting the message across.
Thank you, Barry. I think we have the same climate in the inner areas we do in the in the outer areas of Leeds, but I don't accept the sun does shine more often in Kippex than anywhere.
Shines well on the righteous.
Anywhere else, and that's why we're having a solar farm being developed. I think it's just worth clarifying, isn't it, Councillor Hayden, that the council doesn't put any surcharges or charges on people's gas or electricity bills. That's not something that we do as a council. I do think that is that is worth clarifying when you come back to Councillor Anderson.
Yes, we don't have any. I don't think we've got any powers. We certainly don't put any surcharges on people's. I think that's national taxation, and that's a matter for the government, then, isn't it? In terms of VAT or surcharges for any kind of climate emergency work that may happen. I'm I take the point about getting our message out to elected members as well as the public. We have a really, really good communications department. We put out press releases all the time. The YAP have run stories, especially on the solar panels. And I know that quite a lot of your colleagues were very active on Facebook about promoting that scheme because they wrote and told me that. So that was really, really positive. Also, the team have been to every community committee area, and I know it was really well received in the Outer East. I did hear that the Outer Northeast Community Committee didn't ratify or didn't accept the report. And there was, I don't know which community committee you're in, but the officers have all been to all the community committees to tell people what work that is going on, that they can hire electric bikes, and that all the different work that's going on. And there was a map of the city showing the carbon footprints. And I think that was maybe what was part of the problem. I would like to see examples of leaving people behind. We're working really hard to not do that. And a good example of that was the transport strategy, which brought here in the autumn. And around 70%, over 70% of people agreed with the general direction in Leeds, or people who contributed, of which there were over 3,000. Some wanted us to go faster. Some didn't. There was a minority that thought it was too ambitious, but 70% is a good benchmark that the majority of people are that we're going, and that we're not leaving that many people behind. And as for the different targets, well, the government's target is 2050, and then the average of the West Yorkshire authorities is 2038. And I think I am now saying in my sleep that the Leeds target is 2030, and it's ambitious, and we have to have targets for 2025 in order that we will achieve those targets for 2030. So as a teacher, there's no point just having a target for the end of the GCSE year. You've got to see how they're going halfway through at the end of year 10. Okay, I'll leave it there. I don't know whether Polly wants to add anything. I don't know whether you heard those comments, Polly. So apologies there. But yeah, it's fine. We'll go on to Councillor Galton. Thank you, Leader.
Please, Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if Barry lives in a different part of the outer area of Leeds to me, but I haven't heard anybody complain to me about the investments that are being made through taxpayer-raised money into alternative energies. What they complain about is the fact that their bills are going up, and the reason their bills are going up is because we haven't managed the supply of energy that we need. And one of the things that we can do as a council is hopefully shape the energy generation market. Shape.
No, I said shale.
Shale. Well,
nuclear.
Oh, right. So Barry wants shale mining and nuclear generation
I'm not suggesting
in Leeds.
I'm just saying, what do you mean by shaping? Is that what you mean? Is that what you mean by shaping?
No, it's more about ensuring that those green technologies that generate energy, that are the growth industries and the green jobs of tomorrow that we're all signing up to, whether it's Leeds City Council or whether it's West Yorkshire Combined Authority, actually we're enabling it to happen within the Leeds boundaries. And one of the things that me and you do have in common, since we represent the outer parts of the city, is that we have space for these interventions to happen. And I would love to see more solar farms and wind generation within the Leeds Authority boundary. And we know that's not going to be delivered only by Leeds itself, and merely focusing on the council's own energy usage and procurement is a little bit short-sighted. And I would like to see that developed as we go past 2025 to think about how we can enable others. But in terms of that, what's the word? Fracking. Do you want fracking as well, Barry?
I never said I wanted anything. I'm asking you.
Th-
You said you wanted to shape.
there
it. I'm
are-
suggesting that you're
there
shaping it.
are-
One at a time, please.
There are technologies coming forward.
One at a
where-
time, please. This is turning
where-
into the Muppet Show, and it is a serious item. So, if Councillor Galton, if you could finish your comments, please, and if any other member
Well,
does
it-
want to come in,
It eats into another paper where I won't comment on it again to do with district heating. But one of the things that is being proposed and has been implemented in the Northeast, for instance, is for those areas that were mining areas, there is a way of getting a district heating type supply through the warming of water within deep mine shafts. And that's something, considering our heritage that we have in places like Kippocks and Rothwell and whatever, that's something that we could work on and deliver far cheaper energy for our citizens through a combination of technologies and energy generation options. But we need to actually start now if we're going to reap the benefits after 2025. So I would like to see those kind of initiatives recognised and perhaps some resource put into them. Thanks, Chair.
thank you, Councillor Galton. In our mine and Councillor Harlan's council ward, we have a wind farm, we have a solar farm, we have landfill gas, electricity generation from landfill gas. We have an anaerobic digester, which smells quite often, and when I smell it, I think of you. And we do have a good, we certainly have, I believe, supplementary planning guidance around the use of former mine shafts should opportunities come forward for that. So there are, you're absolutely right, there are plenty of options. Obviously, as a council, we've brought forward the district heating scheme, which again is an innovation around generation, and through the planning process supported other schemes. So you're absolutely right. I don't want to politely on this point, but there are loads of opportunities there that we can that we have taken and can work towards. Councillor Hayden, if you want to come back on any of that.
Oh, I'm a bit confused now. I don't know. Yeah, we're constantly looking at all new ideas, and as Councillor Lewis says, in terms of there is that kind of agreement about looking at deep mine shafts, and as the granddaughter of a miner from County Durham, it's a resource that it'd be interesting to look at using, definitely. So, and that they can once again provide the energy that we maybe need, but we definitely need, as we're seeing with the energy, the heating crisis, we definitely, I'm really proud that Leeds a few years ago, thought about heating and low cost, low carbon heating before the current, years before the current crisis. And we will continue to look at all options from our green and solar and wind and blue infrastructure, as well as much as we possibly can. Polly, do you want to add anything?
Just to say that the University of Leeds is currently carrying out a study on geothermal energy, which we're obviously tap into. So they are looking at it specifically linked to food growing, but obviously there are other uses for it. So that work is underway at the moment.
Good. I wanted to come back.
Yes, please, Councillor Hayden.
Just in terms of you kind of influencing wider that you mentioned about the energy strategy past 2025 instead of our own. What I didn't mention in my and I want to do in my introduction is just a sheer amount of work that is going on with partners across the city on all aspects. So Polly's just mentioned the University of Leeds, which are a huge partner on the in terms of the Climate Commission, but also on our low carbon food. It's a researcher at the University of Leeds doing a low carbon food calculator or a carbon food calculator, and so which we will use, but other places will use. And we are working with private sector across the board and all kinds of different partners on getting this right for the city, because it has to be a citywide approach, both to energy, but all in a whole approach to the climate emergency. So just to assure you on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. I see Statler and Waldorf have gone quiet. So I think we've come to the end of the discussion on this item, and I'll turn to the recommendations on page 730. And I take it everybody is happy with those. And we'll move on to item 15, Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you very much. So this is, as has been previously mentioned, the district heating update and the investment plans and renewal of the local development order. And that's what this report seeks: approval to renew the local development order to enable efficient continued development of the network. Again, hugely proud of this, and it's very little to do with me, but it's in terms of having that vision to develop a district heating network, and it's really coming into its own now. And there's been a great deal of interest and work done with different partners, including the courts, as well as all the civic buildings, the Quarry Hill and the work done there, and obviously the council flats that were retrofitted and connected last year. So a lot of work going on with housing and with the hospital. So incredibly exciting that this low carbon and low cost heating resource, which uses our black bin rubbish, which I love the cyclical nature of this. And then there's other uses being looked at as well going forward. So I will again thank Polly Cook and the team for their innovative and imaginative and diligent work on this, about really putting Leeds on the map in terms of district heating. And I have been more than happy to welcome ministers from the Lords and for MPs from the House of Parliament to show them just what's happening in Leeds. And like I say, hugely proud. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Anderson, please.
Again, can I welcome this great the work that you're doing, and also the controlled growth that you've actually been introducing. You've not gone too fast. You've actually done it in a sensible manner. The one point I'd make is how do we get the vast majority of the city to be able to engage with that? Because there's a number of developments that have been taking place in the city centre, and as long as they are close enough to the piping that you've put in, they can get access to it. But when you get to some of the outer areas, or even just outside the inner ring, even of the council, it's going to be more difficult for them to connect up to it. You're not anywhere near the capacity yet. So there's still capacity there. It's how do we enable the rest of the city to be able to engage in it? And not directly to do with it, but you've given some money to decarbonise some of the council houses in my ward, which is to be welcomed. But there are a lot of council housing missing out on being able to get access to either decarbonisation funding or be able to get access to the district heating scheme. And so in terms of fairness, so that everybody can get access to it. How do you do it? I don't honestly know, but I think maybe that's something we collectively as a council should look at, is how can we improve and get greater connectivity to it? Because you've done a lot of work laying the pipes down when the roads were up for other reasons. So that was a good opportunity. You've done well there, but it's how do we get the rest of the city to be able to get into it? Because there's no doubt it is the way forward, district heating schemes.
Go.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you want to come in, Councillor Hayden?
And then, technically, I don't know. I would love every council house to be connected up to it. As Councillor Lewis pointed out to me, that might be a challenge to get to the council houses out in Kippax. So, and Polly's probably wanting to leave right now. Right. I think we have to concentrate on what we can do right now, and like you say, be sensible about it. As I brought here before, we have said we can't do that line because we're not sure of we're not securing that there will be the demand there. So we are trying to do it really, really sensibly. In terms of decarbonisation, though, there's no reason why apart from money, that and time and kind of having the skills available, to do. We're going to have to do it in an incremental way because of all those reasons. The council houses can't be decarbonised in terms of insulation, solar panels, that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be the only district heating network. There are other that can be set up maybe in there using other sources of heat. So, but I'll let Polly before I go and say too much. And
Thank you. Polly, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, so just to say that at a national level, they've introduced district heating zoning policy, or going to in 2025, and Leeds is acting as one of the pilot cities for that. And the key purpose of that is about doing kind of exactly what you're saying about setting out the zones for the city. So then we will have an area that will be zoned for our district heating network, for any others that come along, but also, looking at what the resources are. So picking up on Councillor Galton's comment about geothermal, there might be areas of the city where that is actually targeted as the area. So that work is actually ongoing at the moment. So we end up with that overarching map of what each area, what's best for each area. So some areas may be best suited to air source heat pumps. But I think we need to map it out. But there is a kind of, I suppose, a realistic limit as to how far that can go and be efficient. And we've really changed, I think, in the last year or so. So at one point we were about connecting as quickly as we can to make sure we got to a viable position. I think now we're much more about how we strategically develop the network and where we think we can bring the most benefit. So which often is probably more in the case of retrofit and being able to offer that alternative to buildings.
Okay, would you like to come in, please, Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate Councillor Hayden's what she said about Polly and the team, and under Neil's leadership, I think they've done a brilliant job in turning something that was, quite literally a pipe dream into reality. Sorry. And I also think it's really critical to the future of the city to have something in place that decouples a lot of development and a lot of organisations from the spikes that we're seeing in energy prices that will continue in the next few years. So I think measuring the impact of what could have happened if we hadn't done this, I think is really important moving forward, so that we can get across to people just how significant this is. But the combination of expertise that Polly brings and the pragmatism of being able to deliver is why we keep getting funding for it. And I think it's something that, the team should be highly commended for.
Thank you, and I'd echo that. Councillor Galton, please.
Yes, very briefly, Chair. It needs to be remembered that these kind of schemes are associated with pretty heavy industry in the first place, because that's what generates the heat. So the majority of people living in nice leafy suburbs do so because they don't want to be associated with that kind of industry. So it is hard to match the two up. And that's why we do need to have that variety of options to enable people to get cleaner, cheaper energy, which doesn't rely on Mr. Putin's pipeline. And doing more of this is really welcome. And let's hope we do get some funding soon to scale it up and make partnerships with private waste recovery operations that are also happening in the southern part of the city as well, because it would be nice to see those complement what the council does itself through its own incinerator.
Thank you. Would like to would Councillor Hayden, Polly, anything you want to come back on that one? Okay, great.
I was just going to say we've entered into a memorandum of understanding with the other energy from waste that's being developed, so that we do work together and that they do complement each other going forward.
Great. I'll turn to the recommendations on page 778. I see everybody is happy with those. So if we could move on to item 16, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm really pleased and humbled to bring forward this report of the vision of West Yorkshire, really, but the Leeds vision of zero for 2040, so another target. But this is it details the work towards achieving the ambition to ensure that by 2040 no one is killed or seriously injured on the roads in Leeds. And has been noted before in scrutiny, and I would like to thank the scrutiny board under Councillor Paul Trustwell for all their work for many, many years, and all the members of the scrutiny board for their work on trying to tackle the problem of serious injury and death on our roads. And I know that they've had a lot of input into this strategy, and I'd like to thank them for the work they're doing, because you can't have a number. There is no acceptable number of people either being killed or seriously injured on the road. The only number you can work towards is 0. And this is what this report details working towards. So I'm pleased to be on the Vision Zero board, which is a West Yorkshire wide board, and is chaired by Deputy Mayor Alison Lowe. It's something that the West Yorkshire Mayor, Tracy Braben, is very passionate about as well. So I look forward to working with that board to achieving this in Leeds, but the rest of West Yorkshire as well. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Anderson, please.
A couple of brief points. One is, do you think there's any way we could argue to try and get some elected member representation on the West Yorkshire Casualty Reduction Partnership? Because trying to get the point across when we feel we do need cameras and they have a different view, if I think if there's an elected member or elected members on there, we might be able to get some success, because it's all just another tool in the box. I'm not saying that's going to make the massive difference, but it will make a difference in some parts of the city. And the other thing is that I did search the internet to try and find the changes to the highway code that have occurred recently. And well, some of them are controversial, but that apart, I couldn't find anything from the highways telling me what they are, so I can then pass them out, because I think a lot of people are not aware, for example, that on some roads, some cyclists will actually will be able to go in the middle of the road, rightly or wrongly. They will now legitimately be able to, and so we need to let drivers know, to be aware that in some cases you might suddenly find a cyclist where there wouldn't be one beforehand, and then you get people overtaking on double yellow lines in order to get past these cyclists, which leads to potential dangers. So if we could get some information out there, people like me can then publicise that, and so that residents can know, because I don't honestly think many residents actually know what the highway code changes were that were introduced recently. That's not a criticism of you, but I'm just generally talking about how to improve.
Councillor Anderson, I'll pick up the casualty reduction point at combined authority level. Casualty reduction partnership points, I should say. Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you. Yeah, on the highway code changes, there was an awful lot in the media, because that's how I heard about it. In terms of and also what was talked about was the fact of, does anybody remember the highway code even as it used to be? But I'm probably more aware of the changes than I am of obviously you remember some things, but we take our test and then you don't take it again, or how many people actually go back and look at it. But I will take it back to highways about whether we can have something, the changes alluded to on the website, on the council website. I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Gary, please.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, we'll follow up with Councillor Hayden. We have been expecting a very significant national campaign from Department for Transport to actually help highway authorities with this and spread the word for everybody. I must admit, I haven't seen it forthcoming yet to a great degree, but certainly we can take something offline and do something anyway.
Must be in the same DFT waiting room as everything else we've been waiting for from them in Leeds. Councillor Galton, please.
Page 66, please, Chair. And it's to do with identifying ways to achieve speed compliance. This document is a very laudable document, but the majority of fatalities that are experienced tend to be on main roads. I'm waiting to be told that that's not correct. And that's where most of the attention goes in terms of things like the West Yorkshire Speed Reduction Partnership and fixed cameras, primarily because of the volume and the speed limits being around 40 miles an hour. It tends to mean that fatalities are higher. But the majority of people live not on main roads and on residential streets. And I would like to, rather than saying this document doesn't cover that, therefore it's not fit for purpose, I would rather say we do need some further work now that and use this as a basis upon which to take the principles from our high streets and into our residential areas where some of the tensions increasingly happen. So in terms of people being injured, you might get less injured on those streets because people actually feel less confident being on those streets because of big issues around parking and the usage of pavements by vehicles rather than road space. And this very much features roads, doesn't mention much about pavements and the rights of pedestrians, the rights of the disabled people. So I would like to see a partner paper to this, which is all about parking and enforcement, because we still have tensions whereby we're delivering lots of 20-mile-per-hour zones, for instance, but our partners in the police feel that once one is introduced, they shouldn't benefit from active enforcement patrols because they're meant to be designed to be low speed, and oftentimes they're not. So I would really like to see this as the basis upon which we build to create that vision that you want to get in 2040, but it will need to have a sister paper which is associated with residential streets in Leeds and how we tackle parking.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is, like you say, this is the paper that sets out our vision for the next 18 years. There will be many more papers that come through that will tackle different issues alongside this. This is the broad paper, but in terms of speed compliance and pavement parking and enforcement, yeah, it's an ongoing problem in our residential areas, in where I live, and especially around schools and primary schools in particular. It's hugely problematic. So yeah, I will let Gary talk about the technicalities of, but pavements are very much part of the highway, aren't they? And our desire to encourage more active travel means that we have to get our pavements right, and I'm very committed to that going forward.
Gary, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a watershed moment for us in terms of road safety, and I can't emphasise the importance of this report too much. This is in my career now of many decades working in this area, moving to this Vision Zero concept is an astounding move from Leeds, but also other authorities across the country that are starting to consider this. And we will be leading the way, certainly in West Yorkshire, and they are following our lead here very closely. To answer Councillor Galton's comment, I think, yes, I think the whole purpose of this document and new approach is to set up these wider conversations with all partners, businesses, individuals, to have these wide-ranging conversations to really get underneath the skin of what's causing these tragedies, these hundreds of people that are being killed and seriously injured each year on our roads. And we need to engage better, and that's not just Highways and Transportation, but the authority across all its element, but also with other public sector partners as well. It really is a game changer, this. It's very ambitious. It's going to be very challenging. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time, and it may, in the end, take a lot of money to actually bring some of this about, and it will be out with the control of the Highway Authority. It will have to be at a national level. But I just wanted to take that moment to stress how important and how what a change in approach this document is to the traditional way that highway authorities have approached these things over the years, and to highlight those points at this meeting, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you, Gary. Does anybody else want to come in on this paper? I take it nobody does, so we'll move to the recommendations on page 826. And I take it everybody's happy with those. And if you could move on to the last paper, please, Councillor Hayden.
Thank you. Apologies, it's me again. So this is the Leeds Public e-bike, so electric bike hire scheme. So this report is on a funding bid for around 2.4 million for consideration by West Yorkshire Combined Authority to implement adopt public electric bike hire scheme in Leeds. So this report sets out the benefits of the scheme can bring to Leeds, especially around the area of health and health inequalities, but also in air quality, which also feeds into health and health inequalities, normalising cycling as a way of getting around rather than safely, securely, and in a pleasant way, rather than just a sport or a fun activity. And how it can support those aspirations to address inclusive growth, health and well-being, and the climate emergency as well of having less cars on our street. So it will provide people who travel within Leeds an opportunity to access e-bikes and to use those bikes as an alternative to other modes of travel, particularly for short distance trips. The report also lines the key financial risks and how they would be managed. So, it's an exciting, and I look forward to. I've already tried out an e-cargo bike, so I'll be looking forward to trying out one of these in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments on this paper? No, great. I take it. Everybody's happy with the recommendations on page 929. Take it all members of the board are. That's great. Thank you, everybody. And we'll now move to cover the exempt items.